You and I had a conversation right before the first round of talks between US and Iranian officials on Iran's nuclear program at the beginning of February. And I want to talk about where we are right now, the moment that we're in, as you and I sit here on Wednesday. Because this morning, Axios reported that a war between the US and Iran was imminent. That is the word that they used. And we are, quote, closer to a major war in the Middle East than most Americans realize. And this reporting just comes one day after US and Iranian officials met again in Geneva to talk about Iran's nuclear program. And reporting indicated that both sides said that progress was made in those talks. So, to start off the conversation, what exactly happened between then and now and in those talks?
Well, certainly the Iranians have been trying to shape the information space after round two of nuclear negotiations in Geneva, talking about progress. But even stateside, we had Vice President Vance talk about the Iranians still not meeting in these talks, President Trump's red lines as it relates to the nuclear issue, let alone other matters. So I still think there's a big gap. The Iranians are going to be coming back allegedly to the table in about 2 weeks' time. And previously, President Trump has said he's going to give diplomacy at least a month. And we've seen already since President Trump's multiple promises in January to stand with the Iranian people, the U.S. force posture in the region changed considerably, be beefed up considerably, more assets, more air defenses, more ships, more destroyers, more carriers now, second carrier strike group on its way. So President Trump, I would say, as he's talking to Tehran, has been sharpening the knife against the neck of the regime's theocrats. And we'll actually have to see whether this is just an issue of military containment or a decapitation operation or a much larger military campaign that'll be sustained for weeks, as the Axios report is hinting.
You did touch on those comments from Vice President Vance, and I want to talk about them more fully, as well as compare them to something that an Iranian official said about the meeting, because the tone and the messaging seemed a little bit different. Iran's foreign minister reportedly said that good progress was made in these talks, and both sides came to a, quote, general understanding on a set of guiding principles. After the meeting, Vice President Vance was on Fox News, and he said that the Trump administration would like to resolve this through diplomacy, but all options were on the table. That's what he said. He also added this, quote, it was very clear that the president has set some red lines that the Iranians are not yet willing to actually acknowledge. So read between the lines, therefore. What exactly is Vice President Vance saying?
I think Vice President Vance is pointing to the past here, and the not too distant past. In 2025, we saw President Trump pursue multiple Iran policies almost at the same time. He had maximum pressure sanctions restored, he had indirect nuclear negotiations, he had military support to Israel, he had direct strikes against the regime's nuclear program, and he had multilateral support to American partners at the IAEA and, more importantly, at the UNSC to support snapback or the restoration of multilateral sanctions on Iran. He basically went through all options on the table in about 9 months' time at historic speed, and he was successful in almost all of them, I would say. So I think Vance wants the Iranians to take a look at the recent past to understand that time for diplomacy is not going to be unlimited. President Trump likes his military action like he likes his diplomacy, and vice versa, which is short, sharp, and decisive. And if the regime thinks they can drag this out again, well, then history will repeat itself because President Trump committed to and lived up to, really, in his first year, all options being on the table. So I think he wants Tehran to understand politically and strategically that the president means what he says.
Is uranium enrichment one of those red lines? And if so, I mean, what does compromise really look like there? Because if the United States is saying you cannot have the capabilities to enrich uranium, you need to stop your enrichment program, Iran still wants the ability to enrich, where is the compromise there?
Well, first off, I have to say I don't think there's room for any compromise after the president said to the Iranian people that help was on the way, that they should be able to choose, different leaders. When he says "make Iran great again," when he says that he will hold those who engage in the crackdown responsible, when he tells Iranians to take over their institutions and keep lists of their oppressors, all of that stuff really erodes the room for continued diplomacy with the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. But nonetheless, President Trump pivoted. He did pivot to bigger picture strategic issues, despite the massive crackdown from state against society in that country in the month of January. But even on those bigger picture issues, Brittany, despite the Islamic Republic taking a major beating and a loss in the 12-day war, the Islamic Republic is still keen to make President Trump pay for something that he achieved already for free. So the Islamic Republic isn't giving up uranium enrichment as a principle, even though it isn't currently enriching uranium because President Trump took away that capacity. Now, any kind of diplomatic agreement that follows needs to erode and remove that capability. And if the Islamic Republic isn't sincere about giving up that capability, well, then it's going to be the one paving the way towards more likely military action in the region. And the lesson of the 12-day war in 2025 was that which the Islamic Republic does not trade away, it will have taken away. And so I see very little room for agreements both on the principle as well as on the morals, but also as we get to the strategy. You know, if the Islamic Republic tries to run a play against Trump and say, okay, we won't enrich so long as you're in office, I don't think that will solve the problem at all. If the Islamic Republic tries to run a play and say, okay, how about we go back to the international consortium idea? I think taking a problem and multilateralizing and internationalizing a problem by adding more nuclear capacity into an already very troubled region is going to be the answer here either. This is going to be about the Islamic Republic surrendering, or it's going to be about the Islamic Republic being stubborn and potentially paving the pathway for another military conflict in the region.
What do you think is the more realistic outcome here? Because you did mention some of President Trump's comments, and I want to tack on some more. Aside from what you said of President Trump saying, help is on the way, we're with the Iranian people, make Iran great again. He also said before that Iran's supreme leader should be very worried. And last week he said that regime change in Iran would be, quote, the best thing that could happen. So, I mean, President Trump has some pretty tough words here. What do you think is the path forward?
I think actually President Trump has been negotiating in public, has been sharing his views and thoughts and values with the public and also the Iranian public and also Iranian leaders. I think President Trump means what he says. When he gave them 60 days, he meant 60 days. He said now 1 month. I'm sure he'll give them 1 month. You know, President Trump, again, means what he says. And the funny thing is, it says more about us as a people trying to take apart those and actually say, no, he doesn't mean that, and projecting our current political orientation or current political preferences onto the president. But I think the mistake the Iranians made is that they projected more onto the president rather than read and understood what the president meant in time. So I think if Khamenei thinks that he's going to be safe or his regime is going to be safe, well, then he need only to look at President Trump's rhetoric and, more importantly, President Trump's record of matching his rhetoric to draw some real inferences here. Because I do think President Trump now, especially post 12-day war, sees the salience of the military option against the Islamic Republic. He's seen the Israelis since 2023 utilize successfully the military tool against Tehran's transnational terror network. And so the more the Islamic Republic does not play ball, the more attractive those options that President Trump has talked about is likely to become.